I opened my front door and saw a rental truck backed halfway into my driveway like it lived there. Two strangers were unloading white folding chairs onto my lawn, lining them up like a little wedding army. And standing in the middle of it all, holding her phone up like she was filming a documentary about my bad attitude, was Pamela Cross, the president of our HOA, smiling at me like I'd just walked into my own surprise party. For a second, I honestly thought I'd stepped into the wrong house. That's how confident they were. Like this was normal. Like the neighborhood had decided my property was community space and I was just late to the meeting. Pamela didn't even say good morning. She just tilted her head and went, "Ethan, don't make this difficult. The board approved it weeks ago." I stared at her. Approved what? A wedding. On my lawn. She gave me this practiced customer service smile. "It's a private event for the Dawsons. Very tasteful. It'll be over by 5. Everyone benefits." Everyone. Like I was included in everyone. A woman in a headset walked right past me, pointed at my porch and said, "Okay, aisle starts here. Arch goes there, and we'll need access to that outlet." That outlet. On my porch. On my house. I stepped down onto the walkway, trying to keep my voice level. "You can't do this. This is my property. I didn't agree to anything." Pamela lifted her phone a little higher like she wanted the best angle. "You did agree, Ethan, by being part of the homeowners association. There are community use provisions." Community use provisions. I repeated because when people say things like that with a straight face, your brain needs a second to catch up. Then I saw it zip-tied to my mailbox like a warning label. A laminated sign that said, "Reserved area, do not block event access." My stomach dropped. Not because of the sign itself, but because of the audacity. Someone stood here on my driveway and decided this was okay. I reached out, ripped the sign down, and the headset woman froze like I'd just pulled a fire alarm. Pamela's smile got thinner. "If you interfere with an authorized community event, there will be fines." "Fines?" I laughed once sharp. "For what? Defending my own yard?" She didn't blink. "For non-compliance." And right there in that word you could hear the whole game. Not a conversation, not a request, just obedience. I walked toward the chairs, and the people setting up automatically stepped back like they'd been told I was the problem. One guy, maybe a photographer, raised his camera and took a few quick shots of me standing on my own lawn like he was collecting evidence. "Seriously," I said, "you're photographing me." He shrugged, not even apologetic. "HOA told us to document everything, in case you escalate." Escalate. Like I was a threat for not wanting strangers staging a ceremony on my grass. I looked around and realized something else. This wasn't a random mess. It was organized. They had a layout. They had stakes in the ground. They had tape lines. Someone had measured. And none of them had asked me one single question. I told the workers, "Stop, pack it up now." Then I looked at Pamela. "If you don't get off my property, I'm calling the police." Pamela's phone stayed up. "Go ahead. I'd love you to explain to an officer why you're disrupting a community event." That's when the anger hit hot and clean. Not screaming anger, the kind that makes you suddenly very calm because you realize you're dealing with someone who isn't confused. They're calculated. I walked back inside, shut my door, and I didn't call the police. Not yet. Because I knew exactly what would happen. Pamela would talk fast wave some HOA paperwork and spin it into neighbor conflict. The workers would keep setting up while 2 officers stood there trying to mediate like it was a loud music complaint. So instead I did something I'm not proud of, but I'm also not ashamed of. I went to my laptop. Within minutes, my inbox lit up like a Christmas tree. 5 emails from HOA. Same subject line, different variations. Temporary use authorization. Board approval notice. Community event compliance. Each one had a PDF attachment with the HOA logo and a bunch of bylaws language highlighted like it was the 10 Commandments. There was a sentence in bold that basically said the board had discretion for temporary community use and that residents shall not interfere. There was also a line about daily fines if I didn't cooperate. And tucked right under all that was the part that made my skin crawl. A section describing my address and the event footprint, like my yard was a rental hall. I paced my kitchen with my phone in my hand, reading it over and over, trying to find the part where I'd ever agreed to this. There wasn't one. No signature, no vote record, no consent. Just authority. Claimed authority? Then mid-afternoon, two board members I barely knew parked at the edge of my driveway and started taking photos, not of the chairs, not of the workers, of my house, my side yard, my fence line, my garage, slow and deliberate like they were inventorying damage before it happened. I stepped outside. "Are you kidding me right now?" One of them, Todd, I think, didn't even look embarrassed. "We're documenting the site." "You're documenting my property." He finally glanced up. "It's for the association file." And there it was again, this weird, warped idea that because I paid dues, they owned my space. That night I sat at my kitchen table staring at those PDFs, and for the first time the fight drained out of me. Not because I thought Pamela was right, but because I could see the path she was trying to force me down. If I kept yelling, I'd look unstable. If I called police, she'd frame it as a dispute. If I did nothing, she'd treat my silence like consent. And I had work the next morning. Bills, real life. I'm not a full-time courtroom hero. I'm just a guy who wanted to live in a quiet neighborhood without someone running my lawn like a venue calendar. I actually caught myself thinking, maybe I should just let it happen. Get through one day and then deal with it after. And the second that thought landed, it scared me. Because that's exactly what people like Pamela count on. Fatigue. People who don't want drama. People who want peace so badly they'll rent out their own boundaries. So I stopped trying to win the argument. I started trying to win the facts. I opened the email chain more carefully, scrolling past all the bold words and fake confidence. That's when I noticed names that weren't just neighbors. Dawson Development Partners. I froze, because the Dawsons weren't just a family in the community throwing a cute little wedding. That name, Dawson Development, was the kind you see on new subdivision signs and planning board documents. And suddenly the wedding made a different kind of sense. Not romance, not celebration. Optics, a shiny neighborhood event, a community showcase, a reason to get people smiling and grateful, while something bigger moved behind the scenes. I kept reading, and buried in one of the replies there it was. A casual line from someone on the board. "Ethan's place is ideal, he keeps to himself. Low resistance. Low resistance." I sat back in my chair and just stared at the screen, because I wasn't a neighbor to them. I was a calculation. They picked my lawn because they thought I wouldn't fight back. That was the moment the tiredness turned into something colder and steadier. The next morning I went to the city permit office with a folder. I printed the PDFs. I printed the emails. I printed the reserved photo I'd taken before ripping it down again because, yes, by the way, they zip-tied a second sign up overnight like they were playing a game. At the counter, the clerk looked at the paperwork, typed my address, and frowned. "I don't see any event permit for this location," she said. I kept my voice calm. "So HOA can't authorize this?" She didn't even hesitate. "HOA can't override property rights. If they're claiming they can, that's not correct." That was the first time I could breathe in 2 days. But I didn't stop there. I hired a surveyor. Not because I love spending money on strangers with measuring equipment, but because I wanted something Pamela couldn't talk over. 2 days later, the surveyor walked my line, tapped a stake with his boot, and said, "Their layout is inside your property by about 4 feet. 4 feet. Not an inch. Not a mistake you make casually." I sent the survey and the city's note back to HOA in one clean email. No yelling, no sarcasm, just facts attached, time-stamped. Pamela called me within 10 minutes. Her voice was sweet, too sweet. "Ethan, why are you involving the city? We can handle this internally." I almost laughed, because when someone begs you to keep it internal, what they're really saying is, "Please don't bring in anyone who can stop me." So I did the one thing Pamela couldn't control. I went public politely. I emailed the neighborhood list. I want everyone to be aware HOA does not have the authority to approve private events on a homeowner's property without consent. The city has confirmed there is no permit for an event at my address, and a licensed survey shows the proposed event footprint is on my land. I attached everything. No insults, no drama, just receipts. That evening, Pamela scheduled an emergency board meeting. Mandatory attendance to address community disruption. When I walked into that room, I could feel it. People buzzing, whispering, looking at me like I'd kicked a puppy. Pamela sat at the front table with her clipboard and her phone, because of course she did. She started speaking in that confident, rehearsed voice about community cohesion and one resident refusing to cooperate. Then the door opened, and a man wearing a city badge walked in and took a seat near the back like he owned the air. The entire room changed. Not loud, not dramatic, just quieter. Pamela's eyes flicked just once, and her smile didn't reach the same place anymore. I stood up when she tried to frame it again. Pamela, you authorized an event on my property without permission, without a permit, and your footprint crosses my boundary. That's not community use. That's trespass dressed up in bylaws. Pamela snapped. That is an accusation. I plugged my phone into the projector. First slide, survey map. Clear line, clear measurement, 4 feet. Second city permit lookup, empty. Third email chain highlighted. Low resistance. You could hear people inhale, like they didn't expect the quiet guy to come armed. The city official stood up and spoke calm as a judge. Homeowners associations do not have authority to designate private property for events without consent. If any fines were issued based on unauthorized enforcement, those are subject to review. Pamela tried. She really tried. We acted in good faith. The city official cut in, not rude, just final. Good faith typically includes confirming jurisdiction. And that was it. Because you can't argue with jurisdiction. The board members started shifting, flipping papers, avoiding eye contact. Todd stared at the table like it owed him answers. Pamela's phone lowered an inch. Just an inch. But it was the first time I'd seen her lose control of the room. A vote was called right there in front of everyone. Temporary removal of enforcement authority, pending review. Then, removal of Pamela as acting president. She opened her mouth like she was going to threaten fines, and nothing came out. The meeting ended with the city official requesting documentation, the board agreeing to retract the fines, and Pamela packing her clipboard like it suddenly weighed 50 pounds. I didn't stay to watch her walk out. I just left, stepped into the night air, and felt something I hadn't felt since this started space. Like my home was mine again. Because the biggest lie people like Pamela sell isn't paperwork. It's the idea that you're too small to push back. Lesson learned. If someone counts on you being low resistance, make sure they meet the wrong person.